Hi. In this case study, I'm going to show you how an agency doubled their revenue through business process optimization. There were no extra costs, no advertisements, and all using their existing team. And away we go. This case study is about my client Freddie and how he more than doubled his revenue. Right? He went from $44,000 a month to about $91,000, an extra $47,000 a month. Most importantly, we removed him as the bottleneck to the projects that went on in his company. We were able to cut his project execution down from about 25 days to 7 days, which was really life changing for his team. And we took the founder, Freddie, out of his day to day operations. So this is really critical, giving him back his time, right? About 1,000 hours back in his year to be an actual CEO, be a visionary, run the company well, or even, oh my goodness, spend quality time with his family. So that's what happens when you remove the founder out of the day to day operations. It's amazing. We built him a stable foundation for growth. Previously, growth was capped by how fast Freddie and his team could work, and now it's not. Before, growth was capped by how quickly he could work, and now it's not. So he has faster delivery, more revenue with the same team. But first, before I get started, who is this video for? This is for business founders and owners who are seeing a certain pattern in their company. A pattern like how every decision has to run through you, right? Nothing moves until you give the green light. You can't unplug. If you do, let's say take a weekend off, everything just falls apart without you. Maybe you hit a growth ceiling. You have the demand, you have the clientele, but your team is maxed out and is crying for mercy. They literally cannot handle more work. And finally, your daily reality is putting out fires. Instead of celebrating when you get a new client, there's dread. Your clients become frustrated, your team is definitely frustrated and exhausted. And that's the reality. And every day is just a new firefight. So if any of this sounds familiar, please stay with me because what I'm going to show you is not just about one agency, right? It's a pattern that I see in almost every small and medium-sized business that I work with where owners are trying to scale, they want to grow, but they're feeling stuck inside their operations. Okay, so about me, I'm Nancy Brown. I'm an operations consultant. I've been doing this for over 20 years, just working with small and mid-sized businesses and helping them overcome their operational chaos so they can grow successfully and, frankly, live happier, better work-life balances, as we all aspire to. Okay, about 10 years ago, my client Freddie founded a creative agency that to outsiders looked very successful. He was doing well and it looked like it was thriving, but behind the scenes, it was, as Freddie himself would say, it was utter chaos. The company was making around $44,000 a month, certainly a healthy living that Freddie was pleased about, but what he was not pleased about is they were maxing out at just 7 projects per month. They couldn't handle more. And if you want to know why, well, Freddie himself would tell you it's because he was the bottleneck. Projects took about 28 days on average to complete and took up 22 hours of poor Freddie's time. So there was literally no time for anything else other than running these maximum 7 projects. Right? Their growth had hit a ceiling and they had an opportunity cost. If we're looking at solely the financial perspective here, they were leaving upwards of $400,000 on the table every year because they had to turn down work. So they had the demand, but the system that they had built just could not handle any more work. Now, here's what Freddie's day looked like, and maybe some of this will look familiar to you. He woke up to a flood of Slack and email messages starting around 6 a.m. and just, as he described it, daily chaos. Projects dragged on and took far longer than their competitors. He was trapped in the weeds, he couldn't leave the office, and he felt that if they just took on one more client, everything would fall apart. He was trapped in what he called project coordination hell. The breaking point was when he tried to manage 5 projects all at once, all kicking off on the same week, and it was just untenable for him. 2 weeks later, his operations manager just quit. She was completely fried and just done. And that's when he realized that he was not growing a business, he was just growing chaos. And Freddie is a smart man. He tried a lot of things. He obviously recognized that there were problems, significant problems in his business, and he tried to fix them in a number of different ways, right? He hired that aforementioned operations manager, but she burned out in the chaos. That was the company at the time. He switched tools, tried a couple of different things. That didn't solve the problem. He put in some bits and pieces of animation. He wrote some instructions manuals, but people were still looking to him for approval and decision points, so that didn't help very much. And really nothing he tried worked. And ultimately, nothing worked because he was solving the wrong problems. Right? He was focused on all these symptoms that he was seeing, but he didn't look at all to see what the root causes were. I'm going to explain this with a fun car analogy. Here's what most people miss in a situation like this. Everybody tries to fix the car, right? Let's put on some new tires, let's use better fuel. But none of that matters if your engine is actually broken, right? So Freddie was fixing or fighting symptoms, but he wasn't looking into the root causes of what was making these symptoms in the first place. Every tool, every hire, every symptoms, these are all symptoms of deeper issues that hadn't yet been identified. So let me show you what I mean here. Now, here's the thing. Your business, all businesses, not just your business, every business runs on processes, right? A business process is how work flows, it's how decisions get made, it's how information moves in your company from department to department and person to person. That's your business engine. And when this engine misfires, that means everything slows. Your clients, your cash, your growth, everything stalls. So ultimately, yes, you can change tools, you can hire people, you can put some automation in place, but if your processes are broken, you are moving chaos around. You're not solving anything. You're spending money and you're wasting time. So, with this introduction, let's look inside Freddie's agency and see what's really going on here so that I can explain to you what I'm seeing. Okay, so anyone who works with processes is going to know what this is. But if you're not familiar with processes, then I will explain. This is a diagram of one of several critical business processes at Freddie's company. Okay, this is his project delivery. That's what it looks like. All of these yellow stickies, these are just my comments. So just try to ignore them. And I'll show you a slide in a minute that has a cleaner view. And all of these boxes here, each box is a task that has to happen in sequence in order for this full business process to run from start to finish. So as we review this, think about the equivalent at your business. Maybe project delivery is not relevant for you. Think of your sales, your fulfillment, your support, whatever way you have of working that drives your revenue as project delivery does at Freddie's company. So now when I started working with Freddie, one of the first things I do with Freddie and with all clients is I'm going to map how their work happens. So this is not like a theoretical exercise, right? It's not how they want it to happen or how it should work in the future. It's how it's working right now on the day to day. And this is what his project delivery looked like from start to finish. Lots of steps and lots of complexity, lots of boxes, right? And as I mentioned, each box here is a different step in the process. And there are over 40 individual steps here. There's a lot of administration, a lot of coordination, a lot of waiting, a lot of firefighting, and then, of course, a lot of firefighting that's not listed in this process because it sort of happens when there's an emergency. So, again, this is not a theoretical exercise, right? This is real complexity, and it's costing them real money in lost capacity every year. So, this project delivery process is so complicated and so onerous that they were actually turning away work because they couldn't handle anymore. So, let's talk about some of the issues that Freddie's team is dealing with. And then we will soon get to the root of the matter. This is the same process tidied up and with communication and approvals points highlighted in red. So clients either felt ignored by Freddie's team or bombarded by emails asking them for stuff, sometimes asking them for the same things over and over again, because there was no shared repository where everything was kept. Information was scattered, it got lost in email threads, and nobody, not even Freddie's team, felt confident that they knew project statuses at any given moment. Approvals were very challenging. They got vague client feedback like make it pop, make it happy, which is really not something, I mean, I'm not a designer, but it's not something I don't think that a designer can work with properly, right? Designers need clear and decisive feedback in order to complete something so that the client can approve it. But the biggest issue, as I saw it, just looking at this, is the clients saw the campaign too late in the process. You can see that over here at the very top, towards the end, right? The right side is the end of the process. The clients saw the full campaign towards the very end of right before they wanted to go live. Often this triggered major changes, as you can imagine, and then everything waited for Freddie's approval. All over here, all of these points are assets and deliverables waiting for Freddie's approval so that he could then send them off to the client. It was just very convoluted. Administrative and data chaos was another significant symptom that they were seeing, right? Administrative work was where massive time was vanishing. They had to type the same information into different systems several times, which was very tedious and inefficient. Not to mention, manually perhaps error prone as well. Projects started with details missing because sales didn't hand off properly to the projects team. One really big issue right over here at the very beginning of the project is signed contracts were the trigger that were required to get this project delivery process started. But because Freddie was so busy, the contracts ended up sitting maybe for an hour, maybe for 2 or 3 days before the projects even could begin. And so often projects started late before they were even kicked off. If you can like get your head around that, right? Now, this manual admin issue is not unique to Freddie by any means. I've had clients who had order details needing to be re-entered between CRM to accounting to fulfillment. I've seen client intake forms that never made it to the delivery team. And maybe you've done this yourself. Like I know I have, right? Copying the same information from one tool to another because the tools just don't talk to each other. But at a certain point, you have to stop that and you have to figure out how to make all your tools speak to each other, just like you want your people to speak to each other. All right, and finally here we have the project delivery. Now this is the actual revenue driving work, the stuff that keeps the lights on, right? And it was a mess. There was no creative brief system, no templates, no asset library. Projects pretty much started from scratch. And if you look at how few red boxes there are here, right? This is the extent of the creative work that was required for this process. Most of the steps here that we're not looking at are searching and waiting and coordinating and redoing. And look, these issues are by no means unique to Freddie's company, right? I've seen a similar pattern with a lot of clients in endless industries, right? Varying industries. I had a software development client who would start coding without any defined requirements from his clients, right? And this is like not a, talking about like waterfall versus agile. He did not have the client business value. He did not have user stories. He had nothing. And he would just start, I don't know, building something. I had a manufacturing client who would do a production run without work instructions, right? Like you can imagine, as I'm saying this, I'm just like getting all, right? Nobody should choose to work this way. That's not so because you are literally guaranteeing rework and cost overruns. It just doesn't make sense to start work without any type of documented or at least agreed upon requirement, right? So this is one reason why work that should have taken a week took a month for Freddie. They were all over the place. So many owners have a knee-jerk reaction, right? Oh, things aren't working. Let's add tools. Let's go from HubSpot to Salesforce because, that's going to fix everything. Or let's do some automation. Or let's, I don't know, do something, right? Let's hire more people. But that is not going to fix what's actually broken, right? That's not going to solve your problem. So let's take a closer look at Freddie's process. We're going to deep dive. Okay, let's look at this process in more detail and let's try to diagnose some of the points, some of the issues that are going on here. Okay, we want to try to figure out what the issues are, the real issues, not the symptoms of the issues, and then we want to figure out how to solve them. Right, that's our goal. We obviously want to solve these problems for Freddie. So just to set the context, this, again, project delivery process, it runs multiple times per week. So every time there's a client with a project, this process is run, right? So each cycle should take a week or 10 days, but in reality, it's taken 25 days, 28 days, maybe 30 days. And what we're about to explore here is why that's the case. Okay. And I'll kind of walk you through how I would do the diagnoses and sort of what I look for as I go through this. So even if you've never looked at a process diagram before, I think there's one thing that may be obvious as you look through it, right? So first, let me just explain what it is you're seeing, and then I'll talk about what's obvious to me. Okay, so each of these rows here are a swim lane. This is called a swim lane diagram. And each row is labeled with the name of the role, the individual who's responsible for it, right? And it's just color coded so that it's easier to look at. So the client is on top, then we have the account manager, which, oh, guess what, is also the CEO, Freddie, then the creative director, and some of the creative roles down here. Okay, and the lines connected just show the communication and the transfer of information between one step and another. So what's obvious to me as I look through this, and maybe to you now that you've had a chance to look at it, is there's one swim lane that's completely overloaded. This is a top-heavy diagram. There is a lot going on over here and much less going on over here. So this row is Freddie. Freddie is the account manager, spending 22 hours on every single project that runs through the company. And looking at this, you can understand why that's so. I mean, there is a ton of stuff going on here. And Freddie's team doesn't seem so overloaded. In fact, some of them seem pretty free and easy. So let's zoom in for a second. Okay. So the process starts right over here when Freddie received a signed contract from sales. This seems straightforward, but in fact, it's already a problem. Guess what? The project started and already there's a problem. And the problem is this. Contracts arrived in different formats. Sometimes they were digital, yay, and sometimes they were paper. Aw, that's not great. And all of them, whether digital or paper, would just sit until Freddie had time to review them. Sometimes that was an hour, and sometimes that was 3 days worth of waiting. And only once he received it, sat down, had time to review it, and manually entered the client's information in an Excel sheet and sent off various instructions to his admin, only then would he kick off the project process. So this means that projects were routinely starting several days late, and not because of any real business reason, right? There was no real reason for the delay, just because Freddie had too many responsibilities, right? So his project started in this scramble mode, and we're just frantically trying to catch up the whole time. I'm like getting stressed out just thinking about it. That's really an awful way to be. So that's item number one. Item number two, separate but related, beyond being overloaded, which Freddie was, he was also the bottleneck. You can see, if you look at the client row here at the very top, all roads lead to Freddie, right? Which by that I mean every communication avenue, every time we reach out to the client here, it's coming from a task of Freddie's. So every single communication with the client went through Freddie. Nothing was ever sent directly from the team, who probably had more time to deal with it than Freddie did. So the creative director, let's talk about her for a second. So she's here in the pink row. She is a very competent and very experienced professional. But because of how Freddie had kind of organized or designed the business, everything her team created had to go to Freddie first. He had to either approve it or request changes. And then once he approved it, he would send it along to the client. And when the client provided feedback, it went back to Freddie. You can see the arrows here going back and forth. He would, I guess, consolidate it in some way, maybe make a little more sense to his team, and then he would send it back to the creative team. So just looking at these items here, you can see the potential for these time delays, confusion, and just mounting frustration, certainly on behalf of Freddie's team and probably on the client side as well, as they're just waiting and waiting for things to happen. So that's issue number two. Issue number three, I mentioned on a previous slide, but I'll talk about it in a little more detail here. This is really a glaring problem. The positioning of the approvals gates is really problematic, right? So the client, we have these little decision points, these diamonds here. The clients were shown some of the campaign issues earlier on, some templates, some mood boards, things like that. But they were only shown the full comprehensive campaign right before it was due to go live. Predictably, there were often issues at this final approval stage. I mean, I really think it was, I think most people could probably predict that there would be problems at that point. So, what happens when you discover an issue at the very last minute? It means you are frantically working to fix it as soon as you can, right? You work nights, you work weekends, you operate in crisis mode, and in any case, you're going to frequently blow past your deadlines because sometimes there's just too much work to get done in too short an amount of time. And all of this because this approvals gate was too late in the process. It was too close to the launch time. They didn't give themselves enough breathing room for contingencies. Okay, I'll just talk about one more item here. And I think it's sort of indicative of everything else we're seeing here, or it encapsulates, let's say, everything else that we're seeing here. And this is a personal pet peeve of mine. So I'm going to go off a little bit probably. I don't care what industry you're in, what business you run, every company, in fact, every human, if we're talking just on the personal level, you need to incorporate some type of learning step, right? A learning loop. How do we learn and improve as human beings and business owners and companies, right? So in this case, the bone that I have to pick here with this process is there's no step for retrospection, introspection, or retrospective. Let me correct that. So every project workflow needs to include some type of retrospective. First, you deliver your project. Great, it's done. Then let's, take a second to breathe and relax. And then you gather the team and you talk about what you learned. What went well? I'm sure there were things that went well that you could celebrate, and what didn't work quite so well that you would change for next time. Then you document those insights. You got to put them down some way, it's somewhere that people can access them and look at them and use them. And then most importantly, you change how you work, you make adjustments based on what you learned so that you can improve the next time, so that your next project is incrementally better. And every project becomes incrementally better and better and better and better, right? So without a learning loop, without a designated point for that retrospective, you are destined to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And in fact, this is exactly what Freddie's team saw. No refinement, no improvement, nothing. Like Groundhog Day, over and over and over again, which is not what we're looking to achieve. So these are just a few snapshots of what we uncover when we analyze a process diagram like this, right? To get to this point, I interviewed the team and Freddie, of course, about their day-to-day experience. And this is key, right? This is super important. It's not just, hey, Freddie, what does your day-to-day experience in project delivery look like? We need the perspective of all of the team members, which is often going to be very, very different than the CEO's perspective and experience, right? So the diagram is not ever created in isolation. Everyone gets a chance to review what's created and provide feedback, and it gets adjusted, and it's all real shared experiences. Now, I will say this. This collaborative discovery process is usually very enlightening, especially for the business owners, because the people in the field know there's a significant problem. I mean, look, Freddie knew there was a big problem too, but he's not as focused on it as everyone else because he just did not have the time, what with all the firefighting, right? So business owners actually usually get quite a different perspective, and it's one they're not used to, where they see the process from their team's perspective. And it really has the effect of fundamentally changing how they understand what's happening in their business and in their operations. And it's usually the first step in getting them to understand that change is possible, to get into that change mindset. So it's quite a useful exercise for a number of reasons. Now, what you saw with Freddie's team is not unique. In fact, when we work with businesses across different industries, whether it's a creative agency, manufacturing, professional services, it doesn't matter. I see these patterns repeating themselves over and over again. So, what looks like chaos is actually rather predictable. There's a cycle that drives all of it, right? And most business owners are stuck in this cycle without even realizing it or being able to recognize it. So, let me show you what I mean. I call this the the operations inefficiency cycle. Okay. And maybe you'll see your own business here as we go through this. Maybe you'll think about your own business a little bit. So the first problem is the lack of standardization. This means that your processes, the way that your company works, the way your people work, it's not repeatable. And you can see this where quality is inconsistent, right? So you have one project which is great and the next is a disaster. You have one production run that's perfect, but the next has defects. Other signs, your team just doesn't take initiative. They don't call the plumber when the pipes leak. They don't reorder supplies. They send you 100 Slack messages asking you basic questions. They wait to ask you things, and it's not because they're not capable. It's because you, as the owner, you never clearly defined who gets to decide what. What is the decision authority at your company? Nobody knows. So everything goes through you. And the clearest sign of your lack of standardized processes, of course, is that everything falls apart should you dare to take time away. Okay, next, we have over-reliance on manual processes. When you don't have standardization, when you don't have standardized processes, everything becomes manual. And manual work, it multiplies your errors, right? So it takes a lot more time. It's tedious, it's annoying. But it is also error prone because you're introducing the element of human errors in there. Common issues that I've seen to kind of explain what this looks like is where you have someone who manually copies every order from your website into fulfillment and then into accounting. And if they make a typo, well, you're sending the wrong item or to the wrong place, and you're basically eating the cost of returns and cleanup time, whatever that looks like, right? Or maybe customer onboarding. You have a new customer sign up, and someone has to manually set up their account, manually enter their info into billing, into your support platform. Lots of hours, lots of time spent doing all of this duplicate work. So what a lot of businesses do to take care of these problems is they hire more people, maybe an admin for data entry, a coordinator whose job it is to sort of chase updates, right? So this is a classic example of treating the symptom and not the disease. You're not getting to the root cause, you're just throwing people at the problem. Ooh, founder bottleneck dependency, right? So this is one of Freddie's key problems in a nutshell, and maybe yours as well. I worked with, well, pretty much all the companies I work with have an issue of founder bottleneck dependency. So all of this is to say, right, we're at the third step here. The two previous steps all contribute to that founder bottleneck dependency. When the founder is the system cannot run without them. The business cannot run without them, right? And when everything's manual, you, the owner, are the bottleneck. You've got process in your head, which is awesome, but it's not in a place that everyone can access, right? There's no documentation, no system, and it's just your brain. And so you really can't delegate even if you wanted to, because you'd still need to be there answering questions all day long. And this is a trap that many, many founders fall into at some time. I worked with a law firm at one point where only the founding partner was allowed to approve settlements or talk to major clients. So you can imagine he didn't take much time off. Or as we see in agencies like Freddie's, where every email, every approval, every budget decision, everything goes to the founder. And, even though the team, again, very capable and can probably handle 90%, maybe 99% of all of these tasks, they've just never been given that authority to do so. All right, let's get to the last step here. And the fourth problem is our disconnected systems, lack of system integration. So we have information all over the place, right? Different tools, spreadsheets, emails, and people's heads, as we just discussed. I had an e-commerce client who had inventory in one system, orders in another system, and support tickets in a third system. So when customers would ask, where's my order? The team would have to check in 3 different places in order to have an answer for them. One more example, this is a fun one. I worked with a construction firm where they had job details by email, photos on their phones, scheduling was in whiteboards in the office, and client communication, I don't know, like it was everywhere. So in this situation, certainly in this construction firm and maybe your company as well, the best way to get information ends up being meetings. So you spend a lot of time, tons of time maybe, in meetings because that's where you understand what's happening and that's where you can all get together to discuss the status of your projects. And that's because you don't have any integration between your systems. There's nowhere I could go or you could go to just find out what's going on at a glance. Pretty great, right? Okay, so here's a quick test for you because it's fun. If I asked you right now to give me the status update on your 3 biggest projects, how many systems would you need to look at to get a definitive answer? hopefully won. But if not, you might want to keep watching. Okay. So the inefficiency cycle here is this cycle that, look, it's beautiful in its simplicity. It is a cycle that feeds itself like any good cycle, right? Without standardized processes over here, everything becomes manual, right? Manual means lots of repeat questions, lots of repeat decisions, which all flow to you, the founder. Now you are buried in work. You've got, your 200 Slack messages a day. You've got your exploding inbox. You do not have time to think about integrating your systems, big picture, visionary work. You just need to firefight. And when your systems are disconnected, right over here, you don't get to see patterns. You miss out on being able to identify patterns that would let you create those standardized processes. But don't worry, you can't do it anyway because you're too busy firefighting. So it just goes around and around and around. And so you stay stuck, right? You're doing everything manually. And the longer you're in this poor cycle, the harder it feels to get out of it. And it's tough. It's tough. So it is important to talk about the cost of not doing anything, right? Not doing something is always an option, right? Just stay stuck. What happens? So this is your opportunity cost, right? This is the loss of your potential gain from whatever available alternatives are out there for you when you choose one option. So if we talk about this from Freddie's perspective for a second, Freddie was maxed out, as we discussed, at 7 projects per month capacity. So he could not take on any more than 7 projects a month. So he was turning away work upwards of $400,000 a year because he literally could not take on any more. So every month that he waited and didn't do anything to fix his problem cost him $33,000 per month that he would never get back, regardless of if and when he ever fixed his problem. Now, I'm not even going to touch on the productivity cost of staying stuck, the personal cost, the market cost rather. Like there are so many different costs to staying stuck. So let's just focus on the financial, although we'll also say this from a personal perspective, your missed family dinners, your canceled vacations, the constant stress, that cannot be good for you as a human person, as a partner, as a parent, right? So think about that. These are very, very high costs to just do nothing. So here's how we fixed these problems with Freddie. We didn't add more people. We didn't patch with more software. To continue with my amazing car analogy, we rebuilt the engine and then we added the right fuel, right? And the critical part here is, why did this work now when Freddie's previous attempts did not work? And that is, first we delved deep to understand the root causes once and for all, right? You need to delve in to the issues. You need to find those root causes. And then you need to solve them once and for all. So we're not solving up here. We're not solving at the symptom layer. We're solving at the root cause layer. And so only once we understood the root causes were we able to design workable solutions. And here's the kicker, right? Once we agreed on the solutions, once we defined those solutions and understood them, then we were able to solve the issues in order. And this is extremely important because each solution builds on the one before it. You can't standardize chaos. You can't automate something that hasn't been defined. You can't delegate if you don't have roles, defined, or you don't know who should be responsible for what. You can't. It just doesn't make sense. So let's go through the solutions in sequence and you'll see how each one unlocks the next one. Okay, so here's step 1 or solution 1. This is the critical first step, and without this, nothing else works. We mapped every decision in the business, every approval, every client interaction, every review, and then we asked, does Freddie really need to be in charge of this? Does he need to own this responsibility? And in most cases, the answer was a resounding no. So Freddie got 4 touch points. He got 4 touch points: a 15-minute welcome video, a very short strategy call, and 2 performance reviews. And that's it. And everything else got delegated. We devised a clear decision authority. Who approves the creative? The creative director. Who handles client questions? The creative director. Who steps in for brand risk issues only? Freddie. So there's no ambiguity there. It was all very, very clear. And this had to come first, right? I mentioned earlier, Freddie tried writing standard operating procedures, also known as SOPs. He tried this, right? Writing his procedure manuals, but they failed because there was no decision making authority built in. The SOPs would say things like review the brief, but who can approve the brief? That wasn't listed. So without clear delegation authority and a decision trees, right, instructions on how to make decisions, every SOP hit the same wall, which was, oh, I need to check with Freddie. And then steps would be followed until a decision point, at which point everything would stop. So once we defined who owns what decisions and gave people real authority, then we could build SOPs that work. So we have role clarity and we have the authority to make decisions. That's beautiful. All right, so step 2, standardization and consistency, right? So standardizing how the folks at the company worked, but taking the founder out of the equation. Simple workflows, clear processes for setup and strategy and execution, not 50-page manuals, right? That's not necessary. Simple visual workflows, ready-made templates for mood boards and content calendars and briefs and client decks. So just really, really organized step-by-step guides and templated assets. All right, beautiful. Look at those templates. We added checkpoints to catch issues early. That's very important. So that takes that whole contingency and frenzy out of the way that would happen towards the end of every project. Right? A knowledge base so that the team had answers to their common questions so they could handle themselves. They knew how to answer clients, they knew how to deal with pushbacks without everything escalating to Freddie. And feedback collection. Thank you very much. A learning loop. Beautiful. Now, let me show you the same process after we fixed the engine with solutions 1 and 2. So what we're looking at is the same process rebuilt. Okay, so it's the same work with the same deliverables, but look at these differences. Fewer handoffs, right? Workflows forward instead of kind of bouncing up and down and around. There are fewer people involved. So we were able to remove one of the people who is now doing bigger and better things for the company. And each of the people left here have crystal clear responsibilities. They know what's their responsibility, they know what they have to do, and they have KPIs. They know what success looks like for their role. Okay, there's clear information flow, data flows between systems. There's a lot of automation in here that I'll show in the next slide. There's no wasting time with manual bits and pieces. And all of the waste has been removed. So there's no unnecessary bureaucracy, which was very silly in a company the size of Freddy's. We've removed the complexity and the delays and the duplication of effort. So what's left here is we have clean, value-added work, right? We have systems that actually support what's going on with the work instead of kind of fighting it, going head to head with it. We've cut down the process to about 20 human steps. So that's, half the scope of the previous process, which was about 40 or so steps. And practically speaking, work that took about 25 days and 22 hours from Freddie now takes 7 days and 4 hours from Freddie. You can see here, if we look at his swim lane, he's got 4 very important steps here, very helpful to build that client relationship, but he's not involved in the day-to-day for this project delivery by any means. And this is what happens when you rebuild the engine, when you're not just kind of stacking solutions on top of a broken process, but you take time and you make the effort to first rebuild the engine and then improve upon it. All right, so the third step here, I mentioned that everything has to happen in order, right? So we have to deal with the founder as the bottleneck and make sure that we have that sort of decision-making authority granted and the roles made clear. And then we standardize those processes and then everything gets connected. So based on the root issues, we very carefully considered the existing tech stack, the requirements of the company, what they needed, what they were lacking, and we added a client portal. So instead of 15 or more scattered emails and assets all over the place for every project, everything lives in one place, right? A place for everything and everything in its place. Everything lives there. Files, feedback, decisions, version control, live status, Clients went from, oh my God, what's going on? I can't find this, I can't find that, what's going on? To, oh, okay, I see. I know where everything is. And if I need to show my boss the campaign, I know where to get to it. I know how to provide feedback. And in fact, I do provide feedback in a very organized and structured way. So clients went from anxious and confused to informed and happy. And bonus, their feedback now makes sense. So we're all happy about that. And as part of everything getting connected, we did put in automation. Yes, I know you were waiting for this, right? So there's AI, there's some automation, but it's supporting the humans that are doing the creative value added work. It's to make the load lighter on them for all of the non value add, the low value tasks that they were doing, that they were wasting their time on. So once the rules were clear and the process is standardized and the client portal was in place, only then did we figure out where the automation would make the most sense. So there's no more double entry, there's no more manual scheduling, folder creation, things like that. So what took Freddie 45 minutes of his very valuable time now takes about 45 seconds. And here's the key, right? So we can't automate before we know what to automate and in what order to do the automation. Everything has to be clear beforehand. Freddie tried automation before, but it did not work because he was doing bits and pieces. And here we got the whole automated very, very nicely. Sequence is extremely important. I really cannot overstate that. So this is the same work and the same deliverables. Here we see the automation layer in gray right there. You can see all of the work that's going through the automation layer. And we're down to 20 human steps plus the automation, which is just a significant reduction in process complexity. And you can imagine, I hope, looking through this, how much happier Freddie, certainly, but the rest of his team is as well to have that process standardization and role clarity and decision-making authority, because that's a really important part of their jobs and job satisfaction as well. So just to recap for a second, we went from a diagram that looked like this, right? This kind of chaos of 40 plus steps to deliver one campaign. You can see all of my like kind of red indicators here, the little clocks showing a delay and the little arrows showing problem, 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 delays, manual work, breakdowns, handoffs, all kinds of things like that. And work that took about a month to this, right? Same work, same deliverables, clean, easy. Work got cut down to about 7 days per project. So a really significant reduction in complexity and team and client satisfaction. So here's what Freddie's day looks like now. He wakes up to dashboards where he knows what's going on and everything is visible at a glance, not disasters, which is amazing. The campaigns that took 20 to 30 days previously now launch in about 7 days. Again, very awesome. His time per campaign, as we talked about, dropped from 22 hours to 4 hours. He has received $1,000, snap. His time per campaign dropped from 22 hours to 4 hours. That is more than 1,000 hours back per year, or 6 weeks if you're doing the math. I mean, that is an incredible gift, right? Think of the amazing things that you could do if someone gave you the gift of that kind of time back, right? That's crazy. So he can be a visionary, he can run the company, he can create new products and services, he could do whatever he wants, take his family on holiday, right? With that time. His campaigns are launching on time without emergency rework, without late night and weekend firefighting, and Freddie is finally able to work on growing the business, just what he wanted. All right, so just a table here with a couple of metrics. I won't go through them all. I've probably said most of them already, but basically, once we fix this engine, we saw very significant, very quantifiable improvements here. The same team, he didn't hire new people, he didn't have a massive tech spend or ad spend outlay. We just fixed the processes, we added some smart automation, we added a client portal, and his revenue capacity increased by over $500,000 a year. That's tremendous. Okay, so I'll quickly go through some feedback here. So we have feedback from Freddie, who is just happy to not be in the weeds all day, happy to be able to run his company, and finally is enjoying his work. as is his team, right? From his creative director, who was one foot out the door, let's say, before this project with us started, and is now happy to be there, happy to be on the team, and really feeling confident in her role. And then one of his clients as well, who also had a foot out the door, because it's hard to be a client working with a company that is so chaotic. Now, Freddie's story is not unique. I've worked with a lot of different companies across many different industries, and I see a lot of this pattern repeating across many, many different companies. And more feedback here, and more feedback here. If Freddie's story sounds familiar, maybe you're the bottleneck, or maybe you work with someone who is the bottleneck. If that's the case, I'd like to offer you a free process audit. This is a focused conversation where we look at one of your processes, whatever's causing you the most pain, whatever's keeping you up at night, and we figure out what's slowing you down. Okay, in 30 minutes, we will look at where you're stuck. We'll look at your handoffs, the delays, the redundancies, whatever is costing you time and money. I will help you identify your top 3 bottlenecks, and I will even recommend a useful fix you can implement right away. Right? And most importantly, this type of conversation really helps to get clarity on what is possible for your business when these problematic issues are resolved. Right? There's no prep work required for you, there's no jargon. We'll just have a straightforward conversation, and I'll do my best to help you. Right? And here's what I've learned after 20 years of doing this. Often, what looks like a people problem or a technology problem, underneath it all is very often a process problem. When you fix the process problem, suddenly your people perform better and your technology actually works. So if you're looking for clarity, click on the link below and book a time with us. And thank you for watching.